one issue that we have really taken on is criminal justice reform. Oftentimes people ask, why is the AFLCIO, why is the labor movement taking on criminal justice reform? Why are you even talking about it? You represent people in corrections. There are 2.3 million people who are currently incarcerated. That is a 500% increase over the last 30 years. For women, that is an 800% increase. And, I think that we have invested more money into incarcerating our communities, primarily our communities of color, most recently our women. We are not spending that same amount of money on education. I think we can also relate a lot of this back to, some of these bad trade deals. I think a lot of times we don't want to make that connection, but there are entire communities that don't have jobs. And, it's not to say that if you do the crime, you shouldn't have to do the time, but what shouldn't happen is getting locked out of society completely. Getting locked out of the ability to be able to vote, being locked out of the ability to earn, being locked out of the ability to obtain housing. And so for us as a labor movement, when we're looking at this entire class of people who are coming out of being incarcerated, they are unable to work, they're unable to support themselves, and they're unable to support their families, which oftentimes leads people to re-offending. So for us, we've really been looking at how are communities being affected by this issue? What are some of the ways that we can actually help with re-enfranchisement? How can we help with re-entry? And one of the ways that labor is taking a stand on this is through our apprenticeship programs. Because, for us, actually labor has a history in our trades of working with people who are formerly incarcerated, helping them get that second chance. And I think oftentimes when we think about, well, what is it going to take to turn our communities around? Well, it's going to take a job. And, over the past 2 weeks, I've had two life-changing experiences. One was yesterday. I went to a private detention center with an organization here in Arizona named Puente. We went to Eloy Detention Center. And 2 weeks ago, I went to San Quentin Federal Prison with the Asian Pacific American Labor Alliance. And there was a young man. His name was Phil. He was Mexican and Filipino. And he told us this story. And he's not a particularly well-read person. He's not a fancy Washington, D.C. policy person. He's a regular, no offense to any of us, but he's a regular person. And the story that he said is when he was 9 years old, he loved being in school, but his mother could not afford for him to not work. So she pulled him out of school, and he started selling flowers with her on the side of the road. Except he was getting his butt kicked working on the side of the road, so he joined a gang so that he could be protected and so he could protect his family. And they were working to make money for their family. Well, unfortunately, when you're a part of a gang, you do gang activity. And he ended up committing a heinous crime and ended up incarcerated. And you know what he said? I loved education. I loved school. But I also had to take care of my mother. I had to take care of my family. And that was a clear connection for me on what happens when people, particularly, low-income people, they have to make decisions. And oftentimes those difficult decisions that they make lead them into a life of having to be incarcerated, sometimes for the rest of their life. So now instead of taking care of his family, now we as a society are taking care of him. Mm-hmm. So there's something to be said for what we need to do to work on making sure that more money is going into our schools, that more money is going into educating folks, that more money is going into vocational programs so that we can help people get on their feet. Because the amount of money that we are spending on incarcerating people and the amount of money that private prisons are making off of our bodies is heinous, and that in and of itself should be a crime. As it pertains to women, 4 in 10 women who have children under the age of 18 are breadwinners. 4 in 10. And so, for women, oftentimes, we don't necessarily talk about some of the issues that women are dealing with. So if a woman is heading the household, and yet she's still only making, 70 cents to a man's dollar, and for Black women and Latinas, it's even less than that, then what does that mean for the family? Women care about retirement security. Women cared about paid sick leave. Women cared about paid family medical leave. And so we have to make sure that when we're having a conversation about raising wages, that we are also cutting the issue and talking about how does this affect women who are indeed taking care of their entire families. So I know there's going to be a lot of talk about 2016 and how we're looking forward to elections and how we're holding elected officials accountable, but we need to figure out ways to talk about the economy in a way that our folks can understand it. They might not understand how, we're talking about these policies in Washington, D.C., but what they will understand is needing the paid sick days in order to take care of their children when they get sick. That's something that people understand. So that's the way that we should be talking to our folks out in the field about raising wages.
Thanks, Carmen. And that raises a really important point because we've covered some of the numbers